How's it going, guys? It's Eclipse here and welcome to a video on a tank that 99% of players fear within the game, and that is of course the Super Conqueror. And the reason being, it's pretty super. It is a fantastic, and I really do mean this with all of my heart, quite possibly one of the best heavy tanks in the game, if not the top tier heavy tank in terms of just the versatility of the tank and being able to push out rounds where you really wouldn't have been able to in a lot of the other heavy tanks within World of Tanks console. Now, is it the 100% best tank in every scenario? No, but what it will do is make your opponents crap themselves as they're deciding what they want to do against a hold down monster. And believe me, the Super Conqueror is a hold down beast. There is really no other tank in the game that you can just sit there and continually take hits straight into the turret with no chance of them being able to pen you, especially if you're using your gun depression. There is a very minimalistic shot that they can hit on the cupola of the Super Conqueror, but 9 times out of 10 they're never going to be able to hit it, and even if they do, they've got to get very, very lucky. Don't get me wrong, you probably don't want to be sat out in front of a Jaegeru firing heat rounds at your turret, at least the top of it anyway. But yeah, how often does that actually happen? And you can see us snapping rounds in with this tank, and that's another thing I want to mention. You probably, if you've ever played any of the British heavy tanks, know exactly what the accuracy is like. And I mean, it's pretty disgusting on the move. These things hit on the move. This is after the accuracy nerfs that happened within World of Tanks console. Before, it used to be even more ridiculous. And you can see here, snapping around into the cupola there of the Chieftain Mark 6, the opposite number, I guess, of the British heavy tanks within World of Tanks. And to be honest with you, I would much rather play the Super Conqueror than the Chieftain. It pretty much is very, very similar. I just feel like the gun handling of the Super Conqueror is better, and you're able to dish out your damage much easier with this tank. And although being slightly slower and unfortunately taking a few artillery hits more, yeah, this tank can really be the number of the Chieftain Mark 6. It really cannot compare, and you can see right here still firing on the move. And as long as you're actually aiming whilst firing in the Super Conqueror, that's the key point. Don't go auto aiming on the move, because yeah, you're not going to hit reliably because of the whole point of auto aim. It's going to be looking behind them if there are moving targets, so making sure you're actually aiming down the sight makes this tank disgusting, and why you see a lot of players fearing it if they ever come into contact with the Super Conqueror itself, and really pushing and trying to run away, because if this tank is hold down, there's absolutely no reason you want to be getting yourself stuck in against a tank like this. Now, unfortunately, we don't manage to hit the waffle, and we make a bit of a misplay here as we decide that we're then going to move down. But you can see just here that the actual hull armour of the Super Conqueror holding up at least a little bit against the Waffenträger Alfie 100 there. Still taking 1,000 damage from 2 shots, but it could have been a hell of a lot worse considering he had 4 in the clip there. Now, what you'll also notice, for the keen-eyed of you, is that in the top right hand corner we've actually been getting a hell of a lot of assistance damage with this tank, and that's because the tank is really, really good at being able to do that. You can consistently get assistance damage, and we've run, I believe, a coated optics within this, or advanced optics, as part of the equipment, which allows us to really boost it up. And yeah, this is why I love this tank. Is just it has the all-round nature that a heavy tank really does need within World of Tanks, at least in this current moment in time. And with the pinpoint accuracy, although being able to get assistance damage via spotting, you're also able to get a hell of a lot of tracking damage as well, because of the pinpoint accuracy where you can pick out the tracks of opponents, and because of the DPM being able to fire approximately once every 6 seconds. Obviously varies depending on what your crew skill is, or what advanced equipment you're going to be using, whether you've got advanced loader or not. And yeah, it really does depend on all of those factors. And as you saw us just snap a shot into the T-57 Heavy there, getting some assistance damage again, and snapping another one straight into him. It's such an easy tank to play, and probably why a lot of you just don't like coming up against these things, because they just don't miss. And you saw us there hitting on the move 2 different tanks and picking up the final damaging hit on our favourite class of the game, the artillery. And yes, we did of course pick up that victory, a very, very quick one, 4 minutes and 42 seconds to be able to win on Malinovka. Yeah, a very easy one. 6,836 combined damage, obviously 4,000 damage, not the highest damage result. But I can guarantee if more heavy tanks came up onto that hill, we would have been able to probably get a hell of a lot more damage within this game. But moving on to into another gameplay which showcases this tank even more, we'll do that now. Heilbronn, one of the newer or updated maps coming back into the game recently, is the next map to showcase in the Super Conqueror, and it's probably one of the better ones to be able to showcase the main functionality of the tank, and that is of course winning those hill scenarios, and why when you're coming up against Super Conquerors on hills, you're probably finding yourself running away in most situations, or at least dying to them in the game. And that is why I think you need to really get your hands on this tank, or at least know the weak points. And of course those weak points are the big fat hull armour of the tank. The side armour is absolutely disgustingly bad. If anyone manages to get a shot into your side armour, you're probably going to be taking a meaty hit. And especially if they manage to get the lower plate of the tank, which is huge. It is British, of course, having those huge lower plates that are basically paper, and if you've got any kind of penetration that isn't KV2 like, you'll probably go straight through the bottom half of that hull armour. And so yes, you're going to probably get penned a lot if you do expose that, and hence when you're coming over ridgelines you want to make sure that you aren't exposing the lower plate. Talking about exposing the lower plate, you saw there the key weakness of the tank. Of course, we expose too much of our hull armour, and as soon as you start doing that, you lose a lot, and I mean a lot of hit points. Don't quite know what the AMX 13105 was doing here, coming out just to get one shot of damage on us. Yeah, bonkers really. But never mind that, we do take another hit there from the Foch 155, that auto-loading tank destroyer. Luckily it wasn't any of the different tank destroyers within the game, being the Jaegeru or the Waffle 100, but luckily we don't have to deal with that. Now here is where the Super Conqueror comes in at its most, well, the best position it could possibly really be in, where you're fighting over a ridgeline with the 10 degrees of gun depression that this tank does get on console, and with the accuracy, doing shots like that over the top of rocks into the weak point of the French heavy there. Oh, it's just too easy. Obviously, not so easy when you're coming up against the side armour of an Object 257, which is probably better sat side on than even facing you frontally, but never mind that. Now, obviously, got to be definitely careful that we aren't exposing the hull armour of our tank, because if a Jaegeru or any of the high penetration tanks within the game manage to get any, and I mean any, of the upper hull armour, they'll probably go through if they're loading premium. Obviously if they aren't, then yeah, it's not going to go too well. But what you don't want to be is the VKK over there, because he's knowing full well he's about to come into a world of hurt against one of the Super Conquerors that we are playing, of course, hitting the weak point of that tank every single time, and he can only really fire standard or HE really at the turret of this tank. I mean, no matter whether you fire premium or standard, you're not going to be able to pen the turret armour of the Super Conqueror unless you get really lucky and manage to hit the top. Obviously, we don't need to get lucky against the HMH AMX M445 side, because yeah, it's paper. But moving on with this gameplay, 3,200 damage gained already within this game, and it's a pretty quick one. And this is where the tank really can pull off some miracles, is as soon as you start realising that you can get rounds in very quickly, and you can rack up DPM super fast. Now we do go for the Object 430 there. You saw me doing a little turret wiggle, getting a little bit annoyed with the fact that we missed another one, and then we don't even get to take a shot at him. So it's utterly pointless us turning the turret, and yeah, we managed to get penned in the side of the turret when we did do that, so even more frustrating with this game. Yes, you want to keep the frontal turret armour, of course, towards the enemies at the front. You don't want to be giving them the side of your turret, because although having spaced armour surrounding the mantlet and the side cheeks of the Conqueror, making it even harder to pen in the turret, it does get penned very easily if they manage to get that back half of the turret armour from the side, or alternatively if they manage to get the back of your turret. Yeah, you ain't bouncing anything. But First shot you've really seen, misaim there as we hit into the rocks behind the Panzer KPFW, and we're in a roll, obviously taking a little bit of a misaim here in this last couple. Unfortunately don't manage to pen the E75 in the track and pen. I was just aiming to actually get a shot into the track, should have just gone with the side armour, probably wouldn't have taken a hit anyway because we would have been able to finish him. So yeah, a bit annoying that I didn't manage to pick him up, but quickly after we'd pick up the VK7201K over there, and yeah, unfortunately left on 285 hit points out of the 2.4 thousand, and yeah, 2.4 thousand is more than enough in a tank that plays very much like a medium accuracy, medium DPM on a heavy tank that can get hold down superbly. Yeah, I think that this tank overall really is such an amazing heavy, and I'm sure if you've ever played it, or you've ever played any of the other heavy tanks in the game, if you've played an E100, yeah, this tank just looks like a dream compared to that. Although E100 is still a fun one to play, it's nowhere near as probably enjoyable, I would say, as the Super Conqueror because of the premium span the E100 has to endure, and although the standard actual armour of the frontal turret of the E100 is good, it's not enough to be able to bounce reliably, and that's where the angling of this British heavy tank comes in real clutch within this game. And so yeah, I think that if you're going towards a tier 10 heavy tank and you haven't actually started up any of the lines, this one would be probably one of the best you could possibly go down. We do have to, of course, be mindful that, yes, it's not the fastest heavy tank, so you aren't going to be able to keep up with some of the other tanks, maybe things like the Chieftain that can go slightly faster, but not massively. We have put on a improved engine or something like that, I believe, the equipment that boosts a traction system, I believe it is, to boost up the horsepower and the top speed of the tank by a little bit to be able to just get into position quicker, and that's what you probably want to be doing as well in your Super Conqueror if you ever are going towards this. And I guess within this video we should really talk about the weaknesses of the Super Conqueror, and that is of course the fact that although having good DPM and although having a lot of turret armor and being able to reliably bounce if you put yourself into a kind of hill position, when you get caught out in any kind of scenario, you are a gigantic slab of hit points. So if you're not using the tank in the correct kind of manner, where you're getting to a ridge line or you're getting hold down behind the wreck of another tank or something like that, any way in which you can use the turret armor, you become basically a medium that is really, really slow, and so yeah, you get rinsed of hit points very quickly. Upper plate can, of course, bounce a few rounds, but if anyone has any knowledge of the weak points of the Super Conqueror in that lower plate and the side armour, yeah, you lose your hit points very, very quickly. So that's something I think we need to mention within this video. Although you can have games where you're bouncing thousands, and I mean thousands of damage within this, it's not as consistent as you probably would hope. And I guess that's kind of the key within World of Tanks, is obviously knowing the strengths and weaknesses of your tank, using those within the game, and when you can't, just making the best of a bad situation, as you see on the move once again into the lower plate of the Jaegeru there. Very, very easy, and of course we did manage to spot that tank, so any damage that he receives now for the next couple of seconds will of course act towards our assistance damage, or at least it would have for anyone that can't spot him already themselves. So yeah, really nice end to the game. We don't manage to get any more damage unfortunately because the Jaegeru was just waiting, he didn't actually fire. But yeah, 5,165 damage in a pretty easy win on Heilbronn through a bit of a dodgy situation where we had a couple of people YOLO in for some reason. Don't quite know what's going on there, but still made the best of a bad situation in that regard, and we made 5,167 damage and 804 assistance, bringing the total up to nearly 6,000 damage, and these were in quick succession of one another. Really fantastic games, and probably the reason why a lot of people really want to get stuck in and get towards the Super Conqueror as fast as possible when they start playing World of Tanks Modern Armour. granted that you've seen what the Super Conqueror can do in action, let's actually look at the statistics of the vehicle and how you can actually set up the tank as best as possible, because we talked about it within the gameplay as to what we'd chosen, and yeah, I just want to reiterate what we have actually put on the tank. And you could see that actually the vision range 444, not what I expected. I didn't actually use advanced optics, but we're still managing to outspot quite a few people within the game. You probably can boost that up dependent on whether you want to swap out another piece of equipment, for example the traction system, but what we did go with is of course advanced loader to boost up the DPM of the tank as fast as possible, because why not amplify one of the best characteristics of the Super Conqueror in that reload of having in the region of 6.76 rate of fire, or reload even 8.88 rounds a minute, which is really good. You've got a DPM in the region, off the top of my head, probably 3,400, somewhere in that area, which is amazing for a heavy tank. You won't be getting that anywhere else, at least unless you look at the other British heavy tanks, which are fairly similar. And whilst we talk about the other British heavy tanks, let's take a quick look at the Chieftain's reload here. Give a little bit of a comparison. 7.42 reload, and I do believe we have the advanced loader as well. We don't have a crew in it, so there's probably not as much of a disparity, but you're still looking at a much better rate of fire with the Super Conqueror. Probably pale in comparison to the FV215B here, that has a pretty decent rate of fire as well, however still has a longer reload. And I guess when you compare them all, Super Conqueror is probably coming in top with the fact that it has the best turret armor out of the three, and yeah, you're not going to be able to really compete on a ridgeline, although having probably the lowest, well, nearly the lowest speed in the Super Conqueror, except we do have traction system on this. Yeah, I guess it depends on what you kind of prefer with your heavy tanks. Do you want a proper hold down monster, or do you want a more DPM orientated side scraping tank? And yeah, I guess that's your choice, but for me, every single day of the week, and I know given the fact that a lot of you know exactly what I'm on about when we talk about the Super Conqueror and how deadly it is within the game, you're probably going to be choosing the Super Conqueror over the other three. Whether or not that's even close to the Chieftain here, the premium version, so it's like the super Chieftain. Yeah, I don't know how I kind of really think. I guess it gets an extra 40 damage on its shots, but I think I'd rather use the Super Conqueror. The accuracy of this tank is just way better. You've also got some pretty nice kind of movement that isn't awful, but it's not bad for a heavy tank, and I think overall this is just the one that I would 100% go with if I was looking to give a new player or an experienced player a little bit of a challenge and give it a go. Other than that, I think that is pretty much the tank summed up. This tank is just amazing. The premium rounds, if you ever need them, are really good as well. 326 millimeters of penetration, so you are able to go through every single tank that you meet frontally pretty much, unless you're coming up against some of the heavily armoured tanks, maybe the Object 268 version 4 from the front, but even then you'll probably be able to pen the lower plate of that if you can get it. But other than that, I think that is everything. Let me know what you think of this absolute monster within World of Tanks, and whether it really does live up to the super title as a Super Conqueror. But other than that, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and I hope you join me back in the next one. Goodbye.